So now that the dust has settled on the transfer portal, I figured this was a perfect time for us to sit down and talk about the work that Alabama did, because the Crimson Tide got quite a few really intriguing pieces in the transfer portal. To be exact, they got 15 new additions. Today, we need to sit down, we need to break it all down, and we need to talk about it. But before we can, as always, y'all know the drill, I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Are you excited about the additions Alabama made via the transfer portal? And then, let's take it a step further. I want to hear from you. Who are you most excited about on the offensive side of the ball? And who are you most excited about on the defensive side of the ball? Can't wait to hear from you. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. Those interactions seem small, they are massive to content creators such as myself, in both getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And as I was sitting down this morning looking at the transfer portal additions Alabama had made, I couldn't help but get excited. So today we are going to go through the list. We're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. We're going to then go to the defensive side of the ball, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Starting on the offensive line, because if you've been around the channel, you'll know this is probably the biggest question I have for Alabama's offense. And the more I talk to the likes of Coach Jay, the more I talk to the likes of Coach Sean, the more excited I get. First and foremost, Coach Cap was a fantastic addition, but this Kalen DeBoer offense in and of itself, in my opinion, is going to be far more conducive to offensive line success than what Alabama has previously experienced. And if Alabama's offensive line can be the offensive line we all know the talent has, I think the Crimson Tide are going to be in a really good position. But that did not stop them from making fantastic additions via the transfer portal. In fact, I think that the Alabama offensive line haul is one of the better hauls they got. And it starts with Geno Vandemark. Now, whenever we look at this, there are some really intriguing factors. With Geno Vandemark, he is an experienced interior offensive lineman that has the versatility to play guard or center, and on top of that, he has prior experience with Coach Cap. So no, he didn't get the spring portion with Alabama's offensive line. We know the offensive line is an incredibly important unit in terms of they need to gel together, but he does have an expectation of what Coach Cap expects from him. He has familiarity with the new offensive line coach, and in my opinion, that's a really good thing. But then we go down to Caden Proctor, and once again, Caden Proctor wasn't there during the spring, but Caden Proctor has familiarity with Tyler Booker. He has familiarity with Jaden Roberts. He has familiarity with Jalen Milroe. He's got familiarity with the team. So though he wasn't there in spring, though he hasn't been able to get acclimated to this new offense by testing it out in the fire, he does have familiarity with the guys next to him. And I think that's going to be able to expedite his growth and his understanding of this offense. He's already gelled with the guy next to him, and especially if he takes that left tackle position, he and Tyler Booker already have a whole season next to each other. I think that's a really intriguing and important factor, but it was also a fantastic story. Transferring from Alabama to Iowa, back to Alabama, it's something that Alabama fans aren't going to forget, and it's going to make for intriguing conversations because he was someone who hit the transfer portal, looked up and said, hey, I don't think the grass is greener on the other side. I made a mistake, and I would like to come back. And the team embraced that. The coaching staff embraced that. And I think that it's going to be a really interesting conversation piece, especially as we evaluate the transfer portal. Did some of these guys make the right decision, leaving where they currently were, thinking the grass is greener elsewhere? And one thing we know, in football, in life, it's not always greener. Caden Proctor proved that, and now he's back to greener pastures. We continue on. Parker Brailsford, yet again, someone who wasn't a full go during spring practice, though we don't know the reason why. We once again get into this intriguing conversation of familiarity. Parker Brailsford is someone who understands Coach DeBoer's offense. He was quite successful at it, not only as a center, but at playing guard as well. He's got that versatility you're looking for. And one thing that I find interesting is when you look at all these recruiting services, of course they rank these kids as 0, 2, 3, 4, or 5-star prospects coming out of high school, but so too do they rank them in the transfer portal. Parker Brailsford was a 3-star coming out of high school and a 4-star in the transfer portal, meaning whenever he got to Washington, it was undeniable the ability he had. He was a fantastic center for the Huskies, one of the top-graded interior offensive linemen in the nation, and now when you look at this, If he is to start next to Tyler Booker and Jaden Roberts, you have 3 of the top 10 highest graded interior offensive linemen in all of college football for this Alabama offensive line, and that is a fantastic place to start. We get to the last addition on the offensive line, and it's Nikhil Betrand from A&M and a tackle, standing 6'6". Now, one of the biggest conversations we have whenever we're discussing the offensive line is, okay, if Caden Proctor is to take left tackle, who is going to take right tackle? And I'm not sitting here suggesting that Nikhil is going to be the guy, but you do now have someone who has been acclimated to college football, who understands the process, and who is going to provide competition, going to provide depth, and iron sharpens iron. That right tackle is going to be one of the most intriguing battles in the entirety of the Crimson Tide fall camp, and I really can't wait to hear more about who's starting to take a lead. But being able to get competitive depth, that's a word and a phrase we talk about so much over here. Really, anytime you're listening to a college football podcast, you're going to hear about competitive depth. Being able to attain that, that's what everybody is looking for. Being able to attain that with very talented pieces, even better. And that's exactly what Alabama got on the offensive line. So you had several offensive line wins, a lot of them having versatility. 2 of them having an understanding of the coaches, one of them in Coach Cap, one of them in Coach DeBoer. Caden Proctor has an understanding of Alabama and the teammates that he will be playing with. And then you have Nikhil Betrand, who comes to Alabama via A&M, having been someone who's proved to be able to make the transition from high school football to college football, providing competitive depth. That's what this is all about. We move forward to wide receiver / tight end. And this is where I think, whenever I asked earlier in this video, who do you think is going to be the most impactful, or who are you most excited to see from Alabama's transfer portal haul? I segmented it into an offensive name and a defensive name. I have a sneaking suspicion that Jeremy Bernard is going to be an overwhelming favorite on the offensive side of the ball, and I can't fault you. Standing at 6'1", over 200 pounds, Jeremy Bernard is an explosive wide receiver. But on top of that, he understands not only what Coach DeBoer wants, what this offense requires, he knows how Coach Shepard wants these guys to go about getting the job done. And I think that's going to be really important. Because when you look at this Washington offense, one thing that we don't talk about enough but is going to be really important, you have to be a willing blocker as a wide receiver. So many times they're running bunch sets and those wide receivers are asked to put a defensive back in the dirt. Jeremy Bernard already knows what the drill is. Jeremy Bernard has already played a year in this offense, and he is going to be willing to be a blocker, and he is going to be a willing participant for this Alabama wide receiver room. A wide receiver room that I think is really talented. Even with the unfortunate injury to Jalen Hale, there is so many guys in this room that I know I'm excited about, and I know Alabama Crimson Tide fans everywhere are excited about, and I think Jeremy Bernard is just the cherry on top. He is an explosive wide receiver that will be a deep threat. He can keep defenses honest because they know, hey, if we mess up, we're going to look up and he's going to be streaking 75 yards to the end zone. And he has an understanding of the offense. I love that for him, but I also love that for what it means for the rest of the wide receiver room. Just like I love how Parker Brailsford has an understanding of this offense, and we already heard a story about how Tyler Booker hosted the offensive lineman, and they had Parker Brailsford over there asking him questions, breaking down the all-22, trying to figure out how they could be the most successful unit they can be. Well, Jeremy Bernard has the ability to do the same thing for these wide receivers. He can tell them what's expected. It's one thing to hear it from a coach. It's another thing to hear it from a peer. And that's what Jeremy Bernard provides. Not only a guy that I think is going to be a fantastic addition to this Alabama offense in terms of what he can provide athletically, but what he can provide cerebrally. And I think that is incredibly important. And he's not going to shy away from contact. This wide receiver room for Alabama has got to embrace the dog mentality. And luckily, when you look at it, there's a lot of guys in this room that I think are going to be all too eager to embrace that mentality. We move forward to the tight end position, a position that Alabama didn't utilize to the degree that myself and so many others thought they would last season. But that didn't stop the Crimson Tide from getting an addition. Josh Cuevas from Washington joining Parker Brailsford and Jeremy Bernard, making the transition with Coach Kalen DeBoer. And Josh Cuevas is an interesting name. Alabama already has a lot of talent in the tight end room. You have Oots, you have CJ Dippre, you have Danny Lewis. But we need to remember, Josh Cuevas in 2022 had 678 yards. He was a big part of that Washington offense in 2022. Now, his production took a step back in 2023, but I bring that to your attention to show you this isn't just a name on a paper. This is a guy who has proven to be hyper successful in college football. He has proven to be a difference maker in college football. And now you add him into an offense, in my opinion, full of difference makers. What's he going to be able to provide? Well, much like we had the conversation for Parker Brailsford, much like we had the conversation for Jeremy Bernard, he can get with these tight ends and say, hey, this is exactly what Coach DeBoer wants. The expectations are as follows, and he can lead by example. I love that. So Alabama already, if we look at offensive line additions, wide receiver, tight ends, you got to be excited. We move forward to quarterback, and Alabama has one of the most loaded quarterback rooms in the country, in my opinion. You have Jalen Milroe, who is one of the most exciting prospects returning in 2024. You have Ty Simpson, who could have gone anywhere in college football and could have started at about 97% of colleges out there, but chose to stick it out with Alabama and finish what he started. And that earned so much respect, not only from me, but any Alabama fan I have the ability to talk to, they all say the same thing. Ty Simpson earned so much respect, and I can't wait for him to get his opportunity. Coming back, joining a loaded quarterback room and saying, no, this is where I want to be. I'm here. I'm going to continue waiting. I'm going to continue developing. I'm going to continue competing. That's a prime example of what we all hope you get whenever you're recruiting a kid out of high school. So then you add in Austin Mack, not to mention Dylan Lonergan. Now, Austin Mack is intriguing because he would have been one of the top-ranked quarterbacks coming out of high school had he not reclassified. And even when reclassifying, he was one of the top-ranked prospects in the nation. Now, this is not a short individual. In fact, if you saw a picture of him whenever he first visited, you'd be excused if you thought it was a defensive end. He stands 6'6" plus and has a ton of ability, but he is young. He's still green. He's still developing. I talk about this all the time with Austin Mack. Whenever he first got to Washington, there were a lot of stories about how excited they were about the quarterback room. And I remember specifically Josh Pate saying, yeah, that makes sense. You have Penix. Of course you're going to be excited. It wasn't Penix they were talking about, though, let's be honest. They were super excited about Penix. They were excited about Austin Mack. Now, it did come with the caveat of saying, hey, he's green. He needs a lot of development. He's still very young. He's still developing, but his talent, his ceiling, super high. And being able to add in more competitive depth, that's exactly what you're after, and they get that in Austin Mack. Now, the last thing I'll say about Austin Mack before we move forward is this is a guy that in high school actually had to move high schools at one point because his original high school wanted to put him at tight end as opposed to quarterback. So he then moved to prove, hey, I am a quarterback, ended up being one of the top quarterbacks in the nation, a top 150 prospect in all of high school football, regardless of position, and that's after reclassifying. And remember, whenever we have these conversations about reclassifying, you're going to drop in the rankings when you reclassify. That's a given. The question, though, is how much. We look at Ryan Williams. I am of the mindset that Ryan Williams would be the number one player in the class of 2025. He reclassified to the class of 2024 and was still a top 10 player in the nation. That is insane. That's not normal, but Ryan Williams isn't normal. We move forward to Graham Nicholson, a kicker who won the Lou Groza Award. So you lose Reichard, who many Alabama fans thought, okay, he should have won the Lou Groza, but then you get in the guy that did win the Lou Groza. That is a very intriguing haul Alabama got on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, no matter where you look. On the offensive line, there's a lot to like. Wide receiver, tight end, there's a lot to like. Quarterback, there's a lot to like. And then in kicker, there's a lot to like. Special teams is the often forgot about part of football, but he's not just a field goal kicker. He also does kickoffs, and he was getting touchbacks at a high rate. So this is a fantastic addition for Alabama, providing them with that versatility on the special teams. And that's a word you're going to hear me say a lot, versatility. Because not only for Nick Saban was versatility king, for Kalen DeBoer, versatility is king. We move forward to the defensive side of the football. And we're going to start on the defensive line. L.T. Overton, coming from A&M. Once again, a guy that reclassified, a guy that was a top 3 player in his respective recruiting class before reclassifying, and was still a top 20 player overall, coming in at number 17. Now, I've said this time and time again. I am really excited about L.T. Overton because I don't think A&M was using him at his natural position. LT Overton is a phenomenal athlete. I mean, an incredible athlete. So they were trying to have him shed some weight and have him rush the edge. And while certainly athletically he can do that, I don't think that's where you're going to maximize his potential. I think in this new defense with Womack, that's where his potential is going to be maximized. Adding a little bit more weight, being that edge setter instead of just being a speed rusher, LT Overton's going to be a difference maker. A former 5-star, one of the top prospects available in the transfer portal. Alabama fans everywhere need to be very excited about LT Overton. We moved to the cornerback room, where Alabama was expected to do a lot of work, and they got some really key additions. We're going to start with Damani Jackson. And as I said about Jeremy Bernard on the offensive side of the ball, where I think that's where a lot of Alabama fans are going to identify this is the guy I'm most excited about, that's how I feel about Damani Jackson on the defensive side of the ball, especially after the interview he just had come out. If you haven't checked it out, please go check it out. It was a fantastic interview. Damani Jackson had some really intriguing insight, and I think Alabama fans everywhere would really benefit from listening to it. But Damani Jackson's a former top 5 player in all of high school football. This is a guy that ran a 10-2 500-meter dash in high school, and he doesn't shy away from physicality. He was banged up at times at USC, and let's be honest, I've talked about this ad nauseum whenever we talk USC. That USC defense was not conducive to success in the slightest. It was a problem at every level of the defense. And so if you're someone who looks at the situation and says, okay, well, Damani Jackson wasn't a world beater at USC, name me anybody on that defense who was. It's very hard to be a world beater on a defense where all 3 levels aren't getting it done. Because then mentally, especially as a cornerback, yeah, you're trying to cover someone, but at every stage of the route, you're thinking to yourself, I know that running back just got through our front 7. I know he did. I'm going to have to tackle him, aren't I? And it's hard to focus on your job when you have little to no faith that anybody else is doing their job. Now, that's not to say USC's defense didn't have talent. I like a lot of the talent on that defense. But the speed defense has proven to be problematic, and the only time it worked was a decade ago. It hasn't worked since. Damani Jackson is now playing with players who are going to be trying to put him in positions to succeed. He's going to be with coaches, such as a Mo Linguist that coached in the NFL, that are going to be putting him in positions to succeed, and he has all the athletic traits it takes. Do not be surprised in the slightest if you look up at the end of the year and he is an all-SEC player. I wouldn't be surprised at all. He doesn't shy away from physicality. He has all the tools. I am very excited about Damani Jackson, but so too am I very excited about Deshaun Jones. Because this 4-2-5 defense is going to employ some zone concepts, and Deshaun Jones at Wake Forest was phenomenal at those. He made himself an undeniable prospect. And I already know, when we talk about Deshaun Jones, when we talk about some of the guys that we're yet to talk about, I'm going to get people saying, but Ty, they're 3 stars. Alabama doesn't recruit 3 stars. And this gets us into an interesting conversation that we're not going to dive super deep into, but that is, do star rankings matter? The short answer is yes, but it's not the end-all be-all. Just because you're a 4-star doesn't mean that's an automatic determinant of success. So too does it not mean that if you're a 5-star, it's an automatic determinant of success. The first cornerback taken in the NFL draft was Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, who was a 3-star. So while statistically speaking, you're more likely to make the college football playoffs if you have over 50% of your roster as blue chips, statistically speaking, you're more likely to go in the first round as a 5 or 4-star. It is not a predeterminant of success in its entirety. Trying to evaluate these guys in high school is hard because there's no baseline athleticism. And then some guys get to college and then all of a sudden the light bulb goes off. You hit a growth spurt. All of a sudden you start playing out of your mind. So don't be dissuaded because a guy is a 3-star. If these coaches have evaluated them and like what they add in, trust the evaluation until you're given a reason not to. Because this staff was just playing in a national championship. They know what they're doing. So Deshaun Jones is a fantastic addition. He is the most experienced cornerback Alabama is going to have this season because remember, Damani Jackson banged up some at USC. But I love those 2 additions for Alabama secondary. Then we get into the safeties. You have Keon Sabb from Michigan. I haven't hid my excitement about this young man. I think he is going to be a true difference maker, and I think Alabama struck gold whenever they got Keon Sabb. But so too do I feel the same way about King Mack. I think King Mack's upside is unbelievable. Coming from Penn State, he comes from a high school in St. Thomas Aquinas that is known for putting out top-ranked prospects, that's known for putting out talented college football players. And I think he's just the next in line. King Mack has got the ability to cover the field at length. Running a 10-600 meter dash, that gives him a lot of range. So whenever you get Keon Sabb, whenever you get King Mack, you need to be happy. But then you get Cam Howard. And Cam Howard is a guy that when I talk to my family on the East Coast, I do have some family that are Charlotte fans, they were real bummed that Cam Howard elected to hit the transfer portal because they were really excited about what he was going to be able to do for Charlotte in 2024. He was a guy that as the season went on was becoming increasingly more difficult not to play. And those are the type of guys you're after. Like I said, before anybody comments, but Ty, he's from Charlotte, the number one cornerback taken in the NFL draft was from Toledo. And if you want to argue that, hey, Terrion Arnold should have been the number one cornerback taken, you're not going to hear a peep from me. But then we still arrive at the conclusion of a first-round cornerback. One of the top available players in the draft was a 3-star from Toledo. So do stars matter? Short answer, yes, but it's an incredibly nuanced conversation, and it's not the end-all, be-all. Cam Howard is a very talented prospect, someone I'm very happy Alabama gets in. And Keon Sabb, listen, you lose Caleb Downs. You get in Keon Sabb. And that is a really good way to start mitigating the loss of a very talented prospect. So as we sit here and look, Alabama did a fantastic job in the transfer portal. They got additions on the offensive line. They got wide receivers, tight ends, a quarterback, a Lou Groza award winner, a former 5-star in LT Overton, a former top 10 player in the nation in Damani Jackson, Deshaun Jones, who has supreme understanding of the game of college football. Keon Sabb has an unbelievable ceiling, as does King Mack, and Cam Howard is really starting to put people on notice. This staff was not playing around. They moved with purpose. And yes, some of these additions came under Nick Saban, but I still want to give credit where it's due. And this new staff did a fantastic job in the spring portion, identifying needs and addressing those needs. But now I got to hear from you. Who are you most excited about? What is the addition that made you raise your eyebrows? Remember, I asked at the beginning, who do you think is going to make the biggest impact on the offensive side of the transfer portal haul, and who do you think is going to make the biggest impact on the defensive side? I'll give you my answer. I think Jeremy Bernard was a fantastic addition. I think what he's going to provide this wide receiver room is going to be tough to quantify, but I'm going to have to go on the offensive line, and I'm split between Parker Brailsford and Caden Proctor, because if Caden Proctor continues to lose weight, get in better shape, and he becomes the tackle we all know he can be, watch out. That's going to be a great addition. Defensively, I'm going Damani Jackson. I have said time and time again how excited I am about this young kid. But I don't think that there's any shortage of right answers, and I can't wait to hear yours. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.